The dim glow of neon lights flickered across the rain-slicked parking lot of the Rusty Spur Diner, a forgotten outpost on the edge of the Nevada Badlands. It was just past midnight, the kind of hour where the desert wind whispered secrets through cracked windows, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and exhaust. Inside, the air hung heavy with the aroma of greasy burgers and stale coffee, the jukebox humming a low, mournful country tune about lost highways and broken oaths. At a corner booth, a young girl named Olivia sat alone, her small frame hunched over a half-eaten slice of pie. She was 12, maybe 13, with wide eyes that had seen too much, faded bruises on her arms hidden under a threadbare sweater, a backpack clutched like a lifeline. Her mother had vanished hours ago, leaving her with a crumpled 20 and a promise to be right back. But the clock ticked on, and the diner felt like a cage. Olivia's gaze drifted across the room, landing on the lone figure at the bar, a weathered biker in a leather vest patched with the emblem of the Iron Oath Riders. His name was Ethan, though no one here knew it yet. He nursed a whiskey, his calloused hands wrapped around the glass, the lines on his face etched deeper than the tattoos snaking up his arms. Ethan had ridden solo for years, ever since the war chewed him up and spat him out, leaving behind a trail of ghosts. A buddy lost in the sands of some forgotten desert skirmish, a promise whispered over a dying fire to watch out for the vulnerable. That oath had pulled him from the bottle more than once, binding him to a code that outlasted the roar of his Harley. Tonight, he'd stopped here on a whim, chasing the horizon to outrun the ache in his chest. But something was wrong. Olivia's eyes narrowed as she watched the bartender, a slick-haired man with a forced smile, slide the whiskey across the counter. It was ordinary at first, amber liquid catching the light. Then, as Ethan turned to pay, a shadow moved behind the bar. The girl froze, her pie forgotten. The drink. It shifted, a subtle swirl, like ink bleeding into water, turning the whiskey from gold to a murky haze. Poison. She knew the signs. Her uncle had warned her about places like this, where debts settled in the dark. Heart pounding, Olivia slid from the booth, her sneakers silent on the linoleum floor. She couldn't just sit there, not when the big man with the kind eyes, the one who'd nodded at her earlier like he saw her invisibility, was in danger. Ethan lifted the glass to his lips, the cool rim brushing his moustache. The diner's chatter faded, replaced by the patter of rain on the roof. But before the whiskey touched his tongue, a small hand shot out from the side, knocking the glass sideways. It shattered on the counter, spilling its tainted contents in a dark puddle that hissed faintly against the wood. The bar went silent. Ethan whipped around, his instincts flaring like a revved engine ready for a fight. But there stood Olivia, trembling yet defiant, her face pale under the fluorescent buzz. "You can't drink that," she whispered, voice barely cutting through the tension. "It's wrong. I saw him put something in it." The bartender's smile cracked, his eyes darting to the spilled mess. Kids imagining things, probably just dirty glassware. Ethan's hand clamped on the man's wrist, not hard, but firm enough to pin him. Up close, the biker's presence filled the space. Broad shoulders, a scar tracing his jaw like a road map of old battles. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "What'd you slip in there, friend? And why?" The diner patrons shifted uneasily, forks pausing mid-air. Olivia backed up a step, but Ethan's glance held her steady, a silent thanks in his steel blue eyes. The bartender stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "Nothing. She's lying." But Ethan wasn't buying it. With a nod to the waitress, who looked relieved to finally speak, he pieced it together quick. The man owed money to some lowlifes in town, the kind who ran protection rackets on truckers and wanderers. Ethan fit the bill, easy mark, or so they thought. The girl had just saved his hide, and in that moment, something stirred in him, an echo of that long-ago promise to protect the overlooked. He released the bartender with a warning growl. "Call the sheriff." Or I will. And kid, he turned to Olivia, softening. You got guts. What's your story? She hesitated, glancing at the empty booth where her mother should have been. She's gone. Said she'd be back, but it's been hours, and this place, it's not safe. Ethan's jaw tightened. The rain outside picked up, drumming like distant thunder. He slid off the stool, pulling a worn jacket from his saddlebag outside. Grab your things. You're not staying here alone. It wasn't a question. As the sheriff's lights flashed in the distance, summoned by the waitress's quick call, Ethan felt the weight of it settle. This girl, with her sharp eyes and hidden scars, had just pulled him back from the edge, and in return, he'd honor the code. No one left behind. What started as a pit stop was turning into something bigger, a ride that might drag old shadows into the light and forge an unlikely bond against the gathering storm. The sheriff arrived in a swirl of red and blue, cuffing the bartender amid protests that dissolved into pleas. Ethan watched from the doorway, Olivia at his side, her backpack slung over one shoulder. The desert night stretched out, vast and unforgiving. But for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone in it. As they stepped into the downpour, his Harley gleaming under the street lamp, he knew this intervention wasn't random. It was a call, a promise reignited. And come dawn, if her mother didn't show, he'd rally the Oath Riders. 50 strong, they'd tear through the Badlands if it meant bringing her home safe. Because in a world of broken words, one act of quiet courage could change everything. The engine roared to life, cutting through the rain like a vow. Olivia climbed on behind him, tentative arms wrapping around his waist. They peeled out of the lot, headlights piercing the darkness, leaving the diner and its secrets fading in the rear view. But Ethan sensed it. This was just the spark. Deeper troubles brewed, ones tied to corruption in the nearby town, where officials turned blind eyes to the lost. And as the miles blurred, he wondered what other poisons lurked, waiting to be uncovered. The rain lashed against Ethan's leather jacket like 1,000 tiny accusations, each drop stinging as they cut through the Nevada night. The Harley's engine thrummed beneath them, a steady growl that drowned out the storm's fury but couldn't silence the questions swirling in his mind. Olivia clung to him, her small hands fisted in his vest, the warmth of her body a stark contrast to the chill seeping through his bones. They'd left the rusty spur behind, its neon sign blurring into a hazy memory as the headlights carved a path through the endless black ribbon of highway. The desert stretched out on either side, sagebrush whipping in the wind, the air thick with the metallic tang of wet earth and distant lightning. Ethan's thoughts raced faster than the bike. He'd seen enough shadows in his life, buddies vanishing in the haze of war, promises made under starless skies that he alone carried like a rucksack of stones. This girl, with her quick instincts and haunted eyes, had yanked him from one danger only to pull him into another. Her mother gone without a trace, leaving a kid to fend off wolves in a place like that diner. It reeked of the same rot he'd glimpsed in border towns, where sheriffs pocketed bribes and families paid the price. He eased off the throttle as they approached the outskirts of Eldridge, a dusty speck of a town huddled against the Badlands, its single main street lined with boarded-up shops and flickering sodium lamps. "Where are we going?" Olivia's voice cut through the roar, muffled against his back but sharp with uncertainty. She shifted, her backpack digging into his side like a reminder of her fragility. "Somewhere dry. Motel on the edge of town. We'll wait out the storm, see if your mom turns up." Ethan's words were steady, but inside, doubt gnawed. He knew the type of places mothers like hers disappeared into. Debts to the wrong crowd, whispers of favors owed to men in cheap suits who ran Eldridge like their personal fiefdom. The Iron Oath Riders had crossed paths with outfits like that before, back when he rode with the full crew, honoring the vow to shield the overlooked, but solo. This felt like tempting fate. They pulled into the lot of the Desert Rose Motel, A squat building with peeling paint and a vacancy sign buzzing like an angry hornet. The clerk, a wiry woman named Grace with grey streaks in her hair and eyes that had tallied too many late-night check-ins, barely glanced up from her crossword. Room 7, cash only, no pets, no trouble. Ethan slid her a 20, his hand brushing the counter scarred from years of spilled regrets. Olivia followed him down the creaky corridor, the carpet damp underfoot, carrying the faint must of mildew and forgotten lives. Inside the room, the single bulb cast long shadows across the sagging bed and chipped formica table. Ethan shrugged off his jacket, revealing the faded iron oath patch, a coiled serpent around a shield, symbol of unbreakable bonds. He hung it on the chair, then knelt to Olivia's level, his voice low like gravel under tires. "Tell me about her. Your mum. What happened before the diner?" Olivia sank onto the bed, hugging her knees, the rain pattering against the window like impatient fingers. Her sweater sleeves rode up, exposing faint marks that spoke of hardships unspoken, echoes of a life shuffled between relatives and rundown apartments. "Her name's Sarah. Works odd jobs, cleaning at the casino in town. Said tonight was a big tip night, something about a private party, but she looked scared, kept checking her phone, told me to wait at the diner, that it'd be quick." Her voice cracked, eyes glistening. "It's not the first time. Uncle Ray. He used to say she owed people money from before I was born, bad people." Ethan's jaw clenched, the pieces slotting into place like gears in an old engine. Eldridge's casino wasn't just cards and slots. It was a front for the kind of syndicate that preyed on the desperate, turning debts into disappearances. He'd heard rumors on the Ryder grapevine. Truckers vanishing after big losses, families left in the lurch, Sarah's private party. Likely a setup, a way to squeeze more out of her. He pulled out his burner phone, the screen glowing faintly in the dim light. "You got a picture? Anything to ID her?" She nodded, fumbling in her backpack for a crumpled photo. Sarah smiling awkwardly in a faded sundress, arm around a younger Olivia at some roadside fair. Ethan studied it, committing the face to memory. The woman's eyes held the same quiet defiance as the girl's, a spark that hadn't been snuffed out yet. "All right. We'll start at the casino come morning, but if she's tangled in something deep, we might need backup." Olivia's gaze flicked to his vest. "Like your friends? The ones on the patch?" He hesitated, the weight of old oaths pressing down. The Iron Oath riders were scattered now, veterans like him, bonded by battles and burials, living by a code that said no one rides alone when it counts. His second in command, a grizzled vet named Jacob, ran the chapter out of Reno, always ready for a call that mattered. But dragging them into this, it meant dredging up his own ghosts. The night he'd lost his best friend in a desert ambush, vowing over the radio static to protect what was left. "Yeah, if it comes to that." A knock rattled the door, sharp and insistent. Ethan tensed, hand instinctively going to the knife tucked in his boot. Through the peephole he saw Grace, her face etched with worry, clutching a steaming mug. "Heard you two come in. Thought you might need this. Hot cocoa for the kid. And word from the diner." Sheriff let the bartender go, said it was a misunderstanding, no proof. Ethan opened the door a crack, taking the mug with a nod. Grace's eyes darted past him to Olivia, softening. "That girl's got fire. Reminds me of my niece back before." She trailed off, shaking her head. "Watch yourselves in Eldridge. Casino crowd don't like loose ends." As she shuffled away, Ethan locked the door, handing Olivia the cocoa. The steam rose like a fragile promise in the cool air. He stepped to the window, peering into the storm-lashed parking lot, where his Harley sat sentinel under the awning. The clerk's warning hung heavy, corruption festering like rust on exposed metal. If Sarah was caught in it, the sheriff's quick release of the bartender screamed complicity. Ethan's fingers itched for his phone again. One text to Jacob. Riding into trouble. Need eyes on Eldridge Casino. Girl's mom missing. Oath calls. Olivia sipped her drink, watching him with those two wise eyes. You believe in promises, like the kind that stick even when everything else falls apart? He turned, meeting her gaze. More than anything, made one once to a brother in arms. Watch for the lost, stand for the broken. Haven't broken it yet. The words felt like gravel in his throat, but true. This detour, this girl, it was reigniting that fire, pulling him from solitary miles into a fight worth the scars. Outside, thunder rolled across the Badlands, a low rumble that mirrored the gathering storm in his chest. Morning would bring the casino's glare, its smoke-filled halls hiding truths sharper than any blade. And if Sarah was there, trapped in webs of greed, Ethan would unravel them. Not for glory, but for the quiet honor of keeping a word given long ago. The night deepened, but in that cramped room, a fragile alliance formed. One act of courage linking to another, forging a path through the darkness. And now I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The first light of dawn crept through the motel's threadbare curtains like a hesitant intruder, painting the room in shades of pale gold and lingering shadow. Ethan hadn't slept much. The storm had eased into a restless drizzle, but his mind churned like the Badlands mud outside. He sat at the small table, nursing a lukewarm coffee from the motel's ancient percolator, its bitter edge sharpening his focus. Olivia stirred on the bed, her breathing steady now, the cocoa mug empty beside her. In the quiet hours, she'd shared fragments, stories of Sarah scraping by, dodging collectors who showed up at their door with veiled threats, the kind that left marks, not just on skin, but on the soul. Ethan listened without judgment, his own scars a silent echo. The ambush in the dunes, the crackle of a radio promising rescue that never came, only his vow to his fallen brother to carry the watch. He glanced at his phone. The text to Jacob, sent but unanswered in the pre-dawn hush. The Iron Oath Riders weren't ghosts, they were flesh and blood, men who'd traded fatigues for leathers, binding their lives to oaths forged in fire. Jacob, with his booming laugh and unyielding grip, had pulled Ethan from the abyss more than once. If this Eldridge mess ran as deep as it smelled, they'd need the full weight of the crew. Eyes in the shadows, wheels on the ground. But calling them meant admitting he couldn't ride this alone. A vulnerability that chafed like an ill-fitted saddle. Olivia sat up, rubbing her eyes. The photo of her mother clutched in her hand like a talisman. You think she's okay? At the casino? Ethan set down the mug, the ceramic clinking softly against the table. We'll find out, but we move smart, no charging in blind. He stood, stretching the kinks from his frame, the floorboards groaning under his boots. The air in the room felt thicker now, laced with the scent of rain-soaked asphalt drifting through the cracked window. He helped her pack, her movements quick and efficient, a kid who'd learned survival too young. As they stepped out, the motel lot shimmered under a sky clearing to reveal jagged peaks on the horizon. His Harley waited, dew-kissed and ready, the engine coughing to life with a throaty rumble that vibrated through their bones. The ride into Eldridge proper was short but tense, the highway flanked by scrubland that whispered of hidden dangers. The town unfolded like a faded postcard, a cluster of low-slung buildings baking under the emerging sun, the casino's gaudy facade rising at the end of Main Street like a false promise. The Silver Mirage, they called it. Neon palms and slot machines luring in the weary, but Ethan knew better. Places like this thrived on desperation, where the house always won and the losers paid in ways that lingered. He parked across the street in the shadow of a derelict gas station, the pump handles rusted like forgotten regrets. Olivia dismounted, her sneakers crunching on gravel, eyes wide at the casino's blinking marquee advertising jackpot nights. "Stay close," Ethan murmured, scanning the lot filled with pickups and sedans. A few bikes leaning like sentinels. No sign of the Oath Riders yet, but Jacob's reply had buzzed in. "On our way. Hold the line." 20 minutes out, maybe less. Enough time to poke without drawing heat. They slipped inside through a side door, the transition jarring, from crisp morning air to a haze of cigarette smoke and the electronic chime of machines. The lobby buzzed with early birds. Retirees feeding quarters into slots. A cluster of men in suits nursing hangovers at the bar. Ethan kept Olivia behind him, his vest a subtle shield, guiding her toward the information desk. A harried attendant, her name tag reading Megan, looked up from a ledger, her smile professional but weary. "Looking for someone? Friend of yours?" she asked, eyes flicking over Olivia with a flicker of concern. "Sarah," Ethan said, sliding the photo across the counter. "Works cleaning here. Private party last night. Said she'd be quick." Megan's expression tightened, her fingers pausing on the page. She glanced around, voice dropping to a near whisper. "Sarah? Yeah, she was on shift, but trouble after. Boss man, Victor Hale. He runs the back rooms." Heard raised voices, then nothing. She didn't clock out proper. Her gaze lingered on Olivia, softening. "Kid's yours?" Olivia shook her head, but Ethan stepped in smooth. "Family. Any idea where she went?" Megan hesitated, the casino's din pressing in like an unwelcome crowd. "Check the employee lounge down the hall, but watch it. Hale's got friends in high places, sheriff's office included." She slid the photo back, a subtle warning in her nod. They moved deeper, the carpet muffling their steps, the air growing thicker with the tang of spilled drinks and desperation. The lounge was a dim alcove, lockers lining the walls, a vending machine humming in the corner, empty save for a janitor mopping a spill, his face gaunt under the harsh light. "Sarah? Ain't seen her since last night. Hale called her in for overtime. You know how it is." He shrugged, but his eyes darted away, fear etching lines around his mouth. Ethan's gut twisted. Overtime in a place like this? It screamed coercion, the kind tied to debts that chained people tighter than iron. Olivia tugged his sleeve, pointing to a discarded glove on the floor. Sarah's, from the monogrammed edge. Nearby, scuff marks on the tile suggested a struggle, hasty footsteps leading toward a service exit. No blood, no overt signs, but the air felt charged, like the pause before a storm breaks. A door creaked open behind them, and Ethan spun, hand hovering near his belt. In strode a man in a cheap blazer, Hale no doubt, flanked by two burly types, their postures screaming hired muscle. "Looking for something?" Hale's voice was oily, smile not reaching his eyes. He eyed Olivia like an inconvenience. "This ain't a playground, folks." Ethan positioned himself between them, voice level but edged with steel. "Sarah, where is she?" Hale chuckled, low and dismissive. "Employee matter, nothing for outsiders." But his glance at the glove betrayed him, a flicker of unease. Olivia's voice piped up, small but fierce. "She's my mom. You can't just—" Hale's face hardened. "Take it up with management, or the sheriff." He gestured to his men, who advanced a step. The tension coiled like a spring, the lounge shrinking around them. Ethan calculated, fight here, draw attention, or buy time. His phone vibrated. Jacob. 5 minutes. Riders inbound. Outside, the growl of engines began to filter through the walls, a distant thunder building. In that heartbeat, Ethan made his choice. "We're leaving, but this ain't over." He guided Olivia back, her hand tight in his, the casino's lights blurring as they retreated. Hale watched them go, his smirk fading into calculation. The service exit loomed, a portal to whatever shadows held Sarah. They burst into the morning glare, the sun now fully risen, casting long shadows across the lot. Engines roared closer, Harleys, a convoy cutting through town like a promise fulfilled. Jacob led, his bike flanked by a dozen Oathriders, leathers gleaming, faces set in quiet resolve. They pulled up in a semicircle, blocking the casino's view, a wall of loyalty against the corruption seeping from its doors. Ethan met Jacob's gaze, the old bond snapping taut. "She's in there, deep." Jacob nodded, dismounting with a creak of leather. "Then we dig, for the oath." The riders formed up, not aggressive, but unyielding, a family chosen, ready to stand. Olivia watched, awe mixing with hope in her eyes. In the face of Hale's web, this was more than backup. It was redemption riding in, oaths weaving into action. The casino doors swung open behind them, Hale emerging with his men, but the riders held firm. The standoff hung in the air, thick as desert heat, the first threads of justice pulling tight. What came next would test every promise, every scar in the unyielding light of day. The sun climbed higher over Eldridge, turning the asphalt into a shimmering griddle that baked the tension radiating from the silver mirage's lot. Ethan stood shoulder to shoulder with Jacob. The iron oath riders fanned out behind them like a living barricade. Leather creaking, engines ticking cool in the heat, the faint scent of hot metal and sagebrush mingling in the air. Olivia pressed close to Ethan's side, her small hand gripping the edge of his vest, eyes darting between the casino doors and the wall of bikers who'd answered a single call. These weren't outlaws. They were guardians, men who'd traded battlefield mud for highway dust, their oaths etched deeper than the ink on their skin. Jacob, broad as a barn door with a salt and pepper beard framing a face lined by too many sunsets, clapped Ethan on the shoulder, his grip a silent reaffirmation of bonds unbroken. Hale emerged from the casino's shadow, his cheap blazer rumpled now, flanked by the two muscle-bound goons and a third man, taller, sharper suited, with the cold gleam of authority that screamed small-town power. The sheriff, no doubt, his badge catching the light like a false promise. Hale's smirk had evaporated, replaced by a calculating squint as he took in the convoy. A dozen Harleys, riders from Reno and beyond, their patches glinting in unison. A serpent coiled around a shield, symbol of loyalty that didn't bend to bribes or bullets. "What's this? A biker convention?" Hale sneered, voice carrying over the low murmur of the gathering crowd. Casino patrons spilling out, phones raised like accusatory fingers. "We don't need a circus for family business." Ethan stepped forward, his boots grinding gravel, voice steady as the desert horizon. "Sarah's not family to you. She's a mother, caught in your web. We know about the overtime, debts you twist into chains." The words hung heavy, laced with the moral weight of truths unearthed too late. He'd seen it before, in war-torn alleys where the vulnerable paid for the greed of kings, a cycle that oaths like his were forged to break. The sheriff adjusted his hat, eyes narrowing at Olivia. "Kid's got a wild imagination. No missing persons report. Move along before I cite you for loitering." But his tone wavered, the corruption in Eldridge's veins showing through. Whispers of kickbacks from the casino, eyes turned from the disappeared. Jacob shifted, his hand resting casually on his handlebars, but the rider's presence alone was a force. A quiet thunder that made the air hum with unspoken threat. Olivia's voice cut through, small but unyielding, echoing the fire that had saved Ethan hours before. "I saw the glove, the marks on the floor. She's in there, you can't lie." Her words trembled, but they landed like stones in still water, rippling doubt across Hale's face. The crowd murmured, a retiree in the back nodding slowly, as if recognizing the rot that had festered too long. Hale's jaw tightened, gesturing sharply to his men. "Get 'em out, all of 'em." The goons advanced, fists clenched, but the riders didn't flinch. One, A wiry vet named Lucas with scars mapping his knuckles revved his engine, a low growl that vibrated through the lot, scattering a few onlookers. Ethan raised a hand, holding the line without a word. Violence wasn't their creed. It was justice, slow and inexorable, the kind that honored promises over punches. Jacob leaned in, his breath warm against the rising heat. Ethan, I rode through the night for this. Remember Kabul, that promise we made over the fire, no one falls alone. This girl's pulling the same thread. The memory flashed in Ethan's mind, flames dancing in the Afghan dusk, brothers in arms sharing stories of home, vowing to shield the innocent from the storm. Sarah, Olivia, they were the overlooked now, threads in a tapestry of redemption he couldn't ignore. Before Ethan could respond, a woman's cry pierced the standoff. From inside the casino, muffled but urgent, Olivia's head snapped up, hope and fear warring in her eyes. "Mom?" Ethan moved on instinct, pushing past Hale toward the doors, the sheriff barking orders that dissolved into chaos. The riders surged forward, not charging but enveloping, their numbers turning the tide without a shot fired. Hale lunged, grabbing Ethan's arm, but Jacob intercepted, his massive frame blocking the path like an oak in a gale. Inside, the lobby's haze enveloped them, slot machines wailing like sirens as patrons scattered. Ethan followed the cry down a side corridor, Olivia at his heels, the air thick with the stale reek of spilled bourbon and fear sweat. They burst into a back office, dimly lit, papers strewn like fallen leaves, where Sarah huddled in the corner, wrists bound with zip ties, a gag muffling her sobs. Her sundress was torn at the shoulder, faint signs of resistance marking her arms, but her eyes lit with fierce relief at the sight of her daughter. "Olivia!" The word escaped as Ethan sliced the ties with his boot knife, the blade glinting cold under the fluorescent hum. Sarah pulled her close, trembling, the reunion a raw pulse of emotion that choked the room. "They wouldn't let me go. Hale said the debt was due, more work or worse. I tried to call, but—" Ethan knelt, his voice a low anchor. "You're safe now. Tell us everything." As Sarah spoke, halting words of mounting debts from a bad bet years ago, Hale's syndicate squeezing her for every shift, threats veiled as favors, the pieces locked. The diner poison? A warning shot meant for wanderers who pried too close. Eldridge's sheriff in Hale's pocket, turning blind eyes to the vanished. Outside, engines roared as more riders arrived, the convoy swelling to 20, their arrival a ripple through the town. Jacob burst in, face set like weathered granite. Sheriff's backing down, crowds turning, but Hale's calling in reinforcements. "We need to move." Ethan nodded, helping Sarah to her feet, her weight leaning on him like trust rebuilt. Olivia beamed up at him, the bond forged in that spilled whiskey now unbreakable. A family chosen in the crucible of crisis. But as they stepped into the sunlight, Hale's men regrouped at the lot's edge, the sheriff's cruiser idling with ominous intent. The standoff reignited, oaths clashing against corruption, the Badlands wind-whipping dust into veils that blurred the line between justice and jeopardy. Sarah's hand found Ethan's arm, gratitude etching her features. "Why? You don't know us." He met her gaze, the old promise stirring like embers. "Because someone kept watch for me once, in the sands, when I was lost. This is how we pay it forward." The riders formed a protective ring, Harleys humming in readiness, the air electric with the weight of what came next. A ride through the heart of the storm, where loyalty would be tested, secrets unraveled, and redemption claimed not by force, but by the unyielding honor of a word kept. If this story is touching your heart, hit that like button to show your support and help spread these tales of courage and redemption. The dust devils swirled across the Silver Mirage's parking lot like restless spirits, kicked up by the idling engines of the Iron Oath riders. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the air into a shimmering haze that blurred the edges of the standoff. Ethan stood at the forefront, Sarah and Olivia sheltered behind him, her mother's arm wrapped protectively around the girl's shoulders. The scent of overheated rubber and sun-baked asphalt hung thick, mingling with the faint, acrid tang of fear sweat from Hale's men, who clustered near the casino doors like cornered coyotes. Jacob flanked Ethan, his presence a solid anchor, while the riders held their formation, a crescent of leathers and resolve, Harleys growling softly, as if echoing the unspoken vow that bound them. The sheriff stepped forward from his cruiser, his polished boots scuffing the gravel, badge glinting like a counterfeit star. He was a tall man, broad in the middle from years behind a desk rather than on the line, his eyes darting between the bikers and the growing throng of townsfolk spilling from nearby shops. Whispers rippled through the crowd, fragments of rumors about missing workers, unpaid wages swallowed by the casino's maw, families fractured by Hale's invisible debts. "This is my town," the sheriff drawled, his voice carrying the false authority of a man who'd long ago traded his oath for a cut of the take. "You outsiders stirring up trouble? That's a quick way to cells in my jail." Ethan didn't rise to the bait, his gaze locked on the lawman, steady as the horizon he'd chased for years. The weight of old promises pressed on him, the one made in the choking dust of a far-off war, to stand for those the system forgot. Sarah's story had ignited it anew. How Hale's syndicate had lured her in with easy loans years back, twisting her desperation into servitude, nights of overtime that left her hollowed out. The diner incident? Just the tip, a sloppy attempt to silence prying eyes like his. "Your town?" Ethan replied, his tone low and even, like the rumble of thunder on the approach. "Looks more like Hale's playground. Sarah's no criminal. She's a mother paying for ghosts you let haunt her." Sarah stepped up beside him, her voice gaining strength from the rider's unyielding line. "He threatened my girl, said if I didn't cover the shifts, they'd come for her next." Her words sliced through the heat, drawing murmurs from the crowd. A mechanic in grease-stained overalls nodding grimly, a waitress from the diner clutching her apron. Olivia squeezed her hand, the girl's sharp eyes scanning the faces, as if cataloguing allies in this makeshift courtroom. Hale pushed past his goons, his face flushed beneath the brim of his fedora, sweat tracing paths down his temples. "Lies. She's in arrears. Casino policy. Sheriff, arrest them, obstructing business." But his bluster cracked, eyes flicking to the rider's patches, the serpent emblem that had rolled into Eldridge like Judgment Day. Jacob shifted, his massive hand flexing on his handlebars, the creak of leather a subtle warning. The Oath Riders weren't here for blood. They were the counterweight to corruption. Men who'd seen empires crumble under greed and rebuilt from the ruins with nothing but their word. The sheriff hesitated, his radio crackling with static. A dispatcher's voice cutting in, urgent and laced with external pressure. "Unit 4. We've got calls flooding in, state patrols en route, something about a missing persons alert on that woman." Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket. A confirmation from a contact in Reno. The Oath Network had lit up, veterans and allies piecing together Hale's web, anonymous tips to higher authorities bypassing the local rot. The sheriff's face paled, the realization dawning that his shield was cracking. Hale spun on him, hissing under his breath, but the damage was done. The crowd's murmurs swelled into open accusations, a retiree shouting, "We know what you let slide here." Tension coiled tighter, the air electric as Hale's men edged forward, fists balled, but the riders matched them step for step, a wall of quiet defiance. Ethan felt the pull of it all, the moral crossroads where violence tempted, but honor held firm. He glanced at Olivia, her chin lifted in that same defiant spark that had spilled his drink and saved his life. This was her fight too. A chance to break the cycle that had marked her arms and stolen her mother's nights. "No more hiding," Ethan said, loud enough for all to hear. "We ride out with them. You want to stop us, do it clean, or face what comes. The sheriff raised a hand, signaling his deputies to stand down, his authority fracturing like dry earth under boot heels. Hale lunged anyway, desperation twisting his features as he grabbed for Sarah's arm, snarling, "You owe me!" Jacob intercepted, his grip like iron on the casino boss's wrist, twisting just enough to drop him to one knee without a blow landed. The goons froze, outnumbered and outmatched by the rider's disciplined front. Engines revved in unison, a symphony of loyalty that drowned out Hale's curses, the sound vibrating through the lot like a heartbeat reclaiming its rhythm. Sarah mounted behind Ethan on the Harley, Olivia sandwiched safely between them, her backpack secure. The riders formed a convoy, peeling out in a thunderous wave that shook the windows of the silver Mirage. Dust billowed in their wake, veiling the casino like a shroud over buried sins. As they hit the open highway, the Badlands unfolding in vast, sun-scorched waves, Ethan felt the wind scour away the morning's grit. Jacob rode parallel, his nod a seal on the oath renewed. State Patrol sirens wailed in the distance, closing on Eldridge, not for them, but for the unraveling truth. Yet Ethan knew the ride wasn't over. Hale's reach extended beyond town lines, whispers of connected officials who might turn the pursuit into a hunt. Sarah leaned forward, her voice cutting through the rush. "I never thought. Strangers like you." Ethan glanced back, the road blurring ahead. Not strangers anymore, oaths thicker than blood. Olivia's arms tightened around him, a silent pact in the roar. Redemption wasn't a destination, it was this. Tires eating miles, promises carried on the wind, a family forged in the fire of standing tall. But as shadows lengthened on the horizon, Ethan sensed the storm wasn't spent. Deeper debts waited, testing if their bond could outride the gathering dark. The highway unspooled before them, like a vein of black tar pulsing through the heart of the Nevada Badlands. The sun dipping toward the jagged silhouette of distant mountains and casting the world in elongated shadows that danced across the sagebrush. Ethan's Harley led the convoy, its engine a steady thrum that harmonized with the chorus of the iron oath riders trailing behind. 20 strong now, their bikes weaving in formation like a pack of wolves guarding their own. Sarah clung to Ethan's waist, her body still trembling from the morning's chaos, while Olivia nestled between them, her cheek pressed against his back, the wind whipping her hair into wild strands that caught the fading light. The air rushed past, cool and sharp with the scent of creosote and freedom, but beneath it lingered the metallic bite of unresolved tension, like the aftertaste of a storm not fully past. Ethan's mind raced ahead, mapping the miles to the next safe haven, a roadside outpost near the state line where the Oath Riders kept a neutral ground, a weathered barn turned sanctuary for those running from shadows. Jacob rode shotgun on his flank, the big man's face a mask of quiet vigilance, eyes scanning the rear view for any sign of pursuit. The rescue at the Silver Mirage had cracked Hale's facade, but men like him didn't fold easy. Their web stretched far, tangled with officials who'd sell justice for a whisper of profit. Ethan's burner phone vibrated against his thigh, a terse message from a rider scout. 2 unmarked sedans tailing at a distance, Hale's boys likely. State patrols tied up in Eldridge, cleanups messy. And the words fueled the fire in his gut. A reminder that oaths weren't just words. They were shields forged in the crucible of choice, tested on roads like this where every mile could turn treacherous. Sarah's voice rose faintly over the roar, her breath warm against his shoulder. "How far does this go?" "Hale." He mentioned connections up north, people who make problems disappear for good. Her tone carried the weight of years bent under that yoke, nights scrubbing floors, while collectors loomed, promises to Olivia of better days that always slipped away like sand. Ethan felt the echo in his own scars, the desert ambush where his brother's last breath had sealed their pact, watch for the vulnerable, stand when the world turned blind. "As far as it takes," he called back. His words steady against the wind's howl. We've got eyes everywhere. The oath doesn't run. We ride through. Olivia shifted, her small hands tightening on his vest, the fabric worn soft from countless miles. Like the promise you told me about? The one from the war? Her question pierced the rush, innocent yet probing, pulling at the threads of trust they'd woven since that shattered whiskey glass. Ethan nodded, though she couldn't see it, the memories surfacing unbidden. Flames licking the night in a foreign waste, his buddy's voice cracking over the static. Ethan, if I don't make it, you carry this. Protect the ones left behind, no exceptions. He'd buried that brother under alien stars, but the vow had pulled him from the bottle into the riders, a chosen family where loyalty outlasted loss. The convoy crested a rise, the Badlands falling away into a vast basin dotted with wind-sculpted rocks that glowed ochre in the twilight. Jacob signaled a pull-off, engines downshifting to a low growl as they veered onto a gravel spur overlooking the valley. Dust settled like a sigh, the riders dismounting in a loose circle, boots crunching on parched earth. Lucas, the wiry one with knuckles like hammered iron, handed out water bottles from his saddlebag, his eyes flicking to the horizon where two specks of dust marked the pursuers' approach. They're closing, not cops, too sleek. Want us to flank 'em? Jacob shook his head, his beard catching the last rays as he scanned the group. Not yet. We draw 'em in, make it clean. No blood if we can help it. The riders nodded, a silent accord rippling through them, veterans who'd learned in foxholes that true strength lay in restraint, in the moral high ground that corruption couldn't touch. Sarah helped Olivia down, the girl's legs wobbly from the ride, but her gaze held steady, absorbing the brotherhood unfolding around her. This wasn't chaos. It was purpose, a family stitched from shared scars, oaths whispered in the dark now roaring into action. Ethan knelt to check a loose chain on his bike, the metal warm under his fingers, but his senses stayed sharp, the faint whine of tires on distant asphalt growing louder. Sarah crouched beside him, her voice a hushed confessional. I dragged her into this, the debts. Started small, a loan for medicine when she was sick. Hale twisted it, made me sign things I didn't understand. Thought I could handle it alone. Regret etched her face, lines deepening like cracks in sun-baked clay. But Ethan met her eyes with the quiet certainty of a man who'd stared down worse. You protected her best you could. That's more than most. Now we finish it together. The specks resolved into vehicles, black sedans, tinted windows hiding intent, engines purring with predatory grace as they crested the rise. The lead car braked hard, doors swinging open to disgorge four men in dark jackets, faces hard-edged under the encroaching dusk. Hale wasn't among them, but his mark was clear. The way they fanned out, hands hovering near concealed holsters, eyes cold with the assurance of untouchability. Hand over the woman! The leader barked, his voice slicing the cooling air, laced with the arrogance of hired enforcers who'd never questioned their leash. Boss says the debt's not cleared. Girl comes too, as collateral. Olivia tensed, stepping half behind Sarah, but Ethan's hand on her shoulder steadied her, a gentle anchor in the brewing storm. Jacob moved forward, his bulk casting a long shadow, the riders closing ranks without a word, their presence a wall of unyielding honor. Debts like that don't hold in the light, Jacob rumbled, his tone carrying the weight of battles won through grit, not guns. Sarah's free. You ride back, tell Hale the oath's watching. Every mile, every shadow. The leader sneered, pulling a pistol halfway from his jacket, the metal glinting like a false promise. Tension crackled, the wind pausing as if holding its breath, the Badlands silent witnesses to the moral precipice. Ethan rose slowly, his knife sheathed but his stance a vow incarnate. No retreat, no rage, just the inexorable pull of justice. One of the enforcers shifted, boots scraping gravel, and in that instant Lucas gunned his engine from the flank, the roar shattering the standoff like thunderclap. The men flinched, hands freezing as the convoy's engines ignited in cascade, a symphony of defiance that vibrated through the earth, scattering the would-be captors back to their cars. Tires spun, kicking up dust devils that veiled their retreat, taillights fading into the twilight like embers snuffed. The riders held position a moment longer, the adrenaline ebbing into a profound quiet, broken only by the whisper of wind through the scrub. Sarah exhaled, pulling Olivia close, tears tracing clean paths down dust-streaked cheeks. "It's over?" the girl whispered, hope fragile as the first stars pricking the sky. Ethan mounted up, the saddle creaking under him, glancing at Jacob with a nod that sealed their bond anew. For now. But Hale's web runs deep. State lines won't stop it. The convoy reformed, engines humming back to life, headlights piercing the gathering dark like beacons of resolve. As they rolled out, the Badlands swallowing the day's heat, Ethan felt the promise renew itself in the rush of air, a legacy of sacrifice, loyalty's quiet roar carrying them forward. Yet in the rear view, distant lights flickered, hinting that the ride to redemption still twisted ahead, demanding one final stand against the encroaching night. The stars wheeled overhead like scattered diamonds on black velvet, the Nevada night unfolding in its vast, indifferent majesty as the Iron Oath Riders carved through the Badlands. Ethan's Harley led the pack, its headlight a lone lance piercing the inky void, the engine's pulse a metronome against the chill wind that clawed at their leathers. Sarah's arms encircled his waist from behind, steady now, her breath sinking with the rhythm of the road, while Olivia rode pillion in front, her small frame a warm anchor against the miles of uncertainty. The convoy stretched behind them, 20 bikes strong, taillights winking like fireflies in formation, Jacob's massive silhouette a steadfast shadow on the flank. The air rushed past, crisp with the night's promise of renewal, carrying the faint, earthy whisper of creosote bushes bending to the breeze. But beneath the freedom's rush lingered the acrid edge of pursuit, a reminder that Hale's tendrils snaked beyond Eldridge's borders into the shadowed underbelly of connected power. Ethan's grip tightened on the handlebars, the worn grips rough under his calluses, channeling the resolve that had pulled him from solitary rides into this unbreakable chain. The earlier standoff replayed in flashes. The enforcers' retreat under the roar of engines, Hale's web fraying at the edges as state lines loomed. Yet the scouts' warning echoed. Those distant lights in the rear view weren't illusions. Hale had called in markers, men with badges and worse, who viewed the riders not as guardians, but as obstacles to be crushed. Ethan's vow, born in the choking sands of a forgotten war, thrummed in his veins. Protect the overlooked, honor the broken word before it shattered lives. Sarah and Olivia weren't just passengers. They were the living embodiment of that oath, a mother and daughter redeemed from the grind of desperation, their scars a map mirroring his own. Jacob pulled alongside at a wide curve, his bike's growl cutting through the wind, face illuminated briefly by the dashboard glow. Scouts say the tales are multiplying, 3 cars now, pushing hard. They ain't local. Got plates from upstate, the kind that screams syndicate pull. His voice carried the gravel of shared history, eyes reflecting the stars as he glanced at the women. We hit the outpost in 20, barricade and call in the full network, vets from Carson City, even the Reno chapter's eyes on the wires. Ethan nodded, the motion sharp against the rush. No splitting up, we stand as one. The words weren't bravado, they were the creed, forged in foxholes where brothers fell, but promises endured. Olivia stirred, her voice piping up over the din, clear and unafraid. What if they catch us, like at the casino? The question hung, laced with the innocence of a girl who'd glimpsed too much shadow. Her hand finding Sarah's in a quiet clasp. Sarah leaned forward, her chin brushing Ethan's shoulder, the faint scent of her faded perfume mingling with the road's wild tang. They won't. These men, they're more than riders. They're the family we never knew we needed. Her tone held the raw edge of gratitude, a woman who'd clawed through years of isolation, debts twisting like barbed wire around her dreams. Ethan felt it settle in him, the quiet power of chosen bonds, stronger than blood, unyielding as the desert rock. The war had taught him loss, but the oath had shown redemption, in small acts like a spilled drink averted, swelling into tempests that toppled corrupt thrones. The outpost emerged from the gloom, a hulking barn silhouette against the starry expanse, its weathered timbers a sanctuary he'd helped fortify years back, a neutral ground where oaths were renewed over campfires and cold steel. The convoy funneled in, engines cutting to echoes that faded into the night's hush, boots thudding on packed dirt as the riders dismounted. Lucas and the others fanned out, securing the perimeter with practiced efficiency. Flashlights sweeping arroyos, chains rattling as gates clanged shut. Inside, the air was thick with the aroma of aged wood and fresh brewed coffee from a battered percolator, lanterns casting warm pools of light across scarred tables where maps unrolled like battle plans. Sarah guided Olivia to a cot in the corner, wrapping her in a wool blanket that smelled of pine and distant rains, the girl's eyes heavy but trusting. Rest now. We've got miles behind us, and more ahead. Ethan watched the exchange, a pang twisting in his chest, the echo of his own lost kin, promises unkept by time's cruel hand. Jacob clapped him on the back, pulling him to the table where riders gathered, faces etched with the quiet fire of men who'd stared down worse. Radios hot, state patrols raiding the mirage. Hales holed up, but his bosses are scrambling. Tips from our network sealed it. Recordings, ledgers, the works. The words landed like rain on parched earth, washing away the day's grit. Ethan traced a finger along the map, the outpost a pinprick in the vastness. But their circle a fortress. Outside, engines growled in approach, the pursuers closing, headlights blooming like malevolent eyes on the ridge. The riders moved as one, no panic, just the inexorable rhythm of loyalty. Some to the barricades, others to the phones, weaving a net of allies from horizon to horizon. Ethan stepped to the door, the cool night air brushing his face, carrying the distant whine of tires on gravel. The lead sedan crested the rise, breaking in a spray of dust, doors flinging open to reveal suited figures, Hale's elite, faces twisted with the fury of unraveling control. "This ends here!" the lead man shouted, his voice cracking across the void, pistol raised in a bluff born of desperation. But the riders were ready. Jacob's booming call halted them cold, engines revving from hidden flanks in a deafening wall of sound that shook the ground. Lucas flanked from the shadows, his voice steady. "Turn back. Oath's law trumps yours. Hale's finished. Feds are en route." The standoff teetered, moonlight glinting off drawn weapons, but the air hummed with the moral weight of inevitability. Ethan stepped forward, unarmed, his presence a beacon of unbowed honor. "Go home. Tell your boss debts like his don't chain the free." The words echoed the promise that had started it all, a girl's courage in a diner, rippling into this moment of poetic justice. The men wavered, radios buzzing with frantic updates, raids in motion, Hale's empire crumbling under the light of exposed truths. One by one they retreated, vehicles peeling away into the dark, tails of dust marking their defeat. The outpost exhaled, riders sharing nods and grips, the bond reaffirmed in silence. Sarah emerged, Olivia at her side, the family whole under the stars. "You did it," Sarah whispered, eyes shining with tears of release. Ethan knelt to the girl's level, his scar catching the lantern light. "We all did. Promises kept. That's the real ride." As dawn's first blush painted the east, the convoy reformed, engines humming with renewed purpose. Hale's shadow receded, but the road ahead promised more trials, echoes of corruption to uproot, oaths to uphold. Yet in that fragile peace, redemption bloomed, a mother and daughter safe, a biker crew tighter than ever. Honor's quiet legacy carrying them into the light. The Badlands whispered approval, the wind a gentle vow that some bonds outlast the storm. Thank you for riding along on this journey of courage, loyalty, and unbreakable promises. If these stories of redemption touch your soul, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next tale from the open road.